And I've never found anywhere a demonstration that Maya is either ergative or agentive. I don't think the Mayanists are asking the question really. But yes, a few allusions about it. When we have seen that, we can now consider what is essential here, that is education. If we want to have an education adapted to that multilingual situation in Europe, we have to wonder what the two basic models can be. The basic model that is a dominant model in Europe nowadays is a monolingual system. The national language is compulsory and it is the educational language. Education has to be performed in the national languages. Each country has one national language, and that language is the educational language. Then we can wonder if the other model exists anywhere, the second model being a multilingual education. And that multilingual education has two forms, or could have two forms. One form where all the languages spoken by the children are authorized, used on a daily basis in all the classes. And this is a right for every single child to get his education, at least partly in his first language or first languages, and in his first culture or first cultures, in a plural. French is one for France, or German for Germany, and English for England is one among others. All are equal. There is a slightly easier form of multilingualism where one language is dominant, generally the national language, but that brings all the other languages can be used, yes, but that brings the necessity to translate, because that's the easy way. Instead of learning what is being said in this or that language so that you can understand what is being said in this or that language, you translate into French, English, or German, and you think that you have satisfied the need to give an education in the language and culture of all the children. Of course you haven't. You have betrayed it, transferred it. So much is lost in translation. School is by definitional practice in Europe homogenizing, alienating, and the central word, deculturizing. In the name of in the perspective of, in the project of some acculturizing. But the acculturizing is based on the deculturizing first, which means that all the kids who go in those classes in our schools are deculturized from their first language and first culture, do not get the education they are supposed to get, ethically at least, in their first language and first culture, and are forced, for some of them, obliged, for most of them, to learn the national language and the national culture. Full stop. End of the game. That's what I call the multilingualism that is in a certain way made comprehensive. Comprehensive multilingualism as opposed to real multilingualism, and as opposed to the other system, which is monolingualism. And by monolingualism, I'm very clear. Up to the 1970s, that's not long ago, it was forbidden to use the local Picard dialects or language in Valenciennes schools, even in the playground, and the children who were heard using the local Rouchy dialect of Picard were punished. Up to the 1970s in France, that was the practice. I met people who were educated at the time, or the parents of kids who were educated at the time, and they gave me their testimonies, that yes, it happened, and regularly. Just wonder, what did the Canadians, the Americans, the Australians did to the local native populations when they took all the children away from their families, put them in a school system, which was a boarding school most of the time, and imposed onto them the Christian religion, the local language, and where it was banned to speak their languages, to read or write their languages or their culture. That was deculturizing in the name of some kind of acculturizing that, of course, was frustrated and perverted in such a system, with a lot of kids who died because of the punishment that were imposed onto them because they didn't want to abide by the rule. Was it different in Valenciennes when a child who spoke a few words in Rouchy was punished because he dared speak Rouchy in the playground of his school where only French was supposed to be used? In the 1970s. Well, it's true. In 1962, I was mocked by a teacher in a class because I dared use a local Oxton word instead of the standard French word. Mocked is not killing you, but it is frustrating, alienating, deculturizing, just the same. I would say it was in 1962. Yes, but in 1962 that was already a little bit late. There should have been changes in the meantime, after 1945 at least. Then when you get into that education, how do you deal with the multiple languages? And there we have to think in our modern world. There is a very easy way to do it. First, to authorize all those languages in the classroom. But that is not motivating for most children who are going to submit and accept and suffer from the Turkish, the Kurdish, the Bambara, the Hindi, the Sinhala, the Vietnamese, the Chinese, they may have to listen to without trying at all to understand in their classes. But there is a more interesting way of doing it with modern technology, and it is called virtual reality and artificial intelligence. Imagine that we project the children in a virtual reality universe where the rule will be that to do the adventure, to go along the way on the trail of the discovery they want to discover, they're going to have to understand 3 or 4 languages, or manage to understand 3 or 4 languages, and say a few words in those 3 or 4 languages. It's not motivating to have foreign languages around you. But if the adventure of the virtual reality universe is motivating, they will go through the difficulties, and among others, the 3 or 4 languages. And motivation will be all the more important if 1. The topic of the adventure is chosen by the kids and then managed by the artificial intelligence so that it really corresponds to what the kids had demanded collectively. Then, within that project, each kid can have access to the artificial intelligence, have his own little branch of artificial intelligence where he can express his desire, his questions, his what he wants. And within the general frame of the adventure, that artificial intelligence of the kid can work with the artificial intelligence of the adventure to include what the kid, the individual kid, and then the individual kids in the plural are, all of them separately, asking for. Then it becomes multiple, it becomes lively, it becomes attractive. And if it is attractive, it is motivating. And then if 4 languages are deeply embedded in that virtual reality adventure, the kids will have to cope with it. And they will cope with it. And if they want to have a drink, they will have to ask for a drink, and if they want to have some food, they will have to ask for some food, and if they want to go somewhere they don't know, they will have to ask how to go there from the people they're going to meet in that beautiful virtual reality situation. But you can even go further than that. After all, in France, Mélenchon did it for political reasons, having a meeting in his own bone and flesh reality in Paris, and having at the same time another meeting in Lyon or some other place, where he was projected from the first meeting hologrammically. A hologram was on a stage in the second meeting, was able to listen, since it was plugged onto the real man all the time, to what the people were saying in the second meeting, and eventually the real man could, through the hologram, answer the questions that in the second meeting the people may ask. If that is possible for political reasons, I don't see why it shouldn't be possible for pedagogical reasons. Project our kids, maybe not a class of 25, but a pair or a triplet, 2 or 3 kids, into a street in New York, hologrammically, and let them live in that street in New York. People are going to go through them, but it doesn't matter really. It's fun, isn't it? After all, they see that on their beautiful games, and they see that in the beautiful series that they watch all the time. But they will hear people, they will understand people, or not understand people, try to understand people, and discover a tremendous amount of things that they couldn't discover otherwise, because it costs a lot more to take a plane, and it costs a lot more time, more than money, to take a plane and just to spend 1 or 2 hours on Fifth Avenue in New York. That's the future of our education of multilingualism. And this is the real solution if it is well done, if the kids are associated from the very beginning to the very end. They will be motivated and they will learn a tremendous amount of things, even a tremendous amount of languages. But we have to wonder if we couldn't go beyond with that kind of approach. Just wonder, have our schools really taught the reality, the physiological, physical, mental, cultural reality of what we pretend we have done? Have we really taught the true reality, daily reality of slavery? Esclavage in French, and Sklaverei in German? Have we really taught to our children the direct, concrete, material reality of feudalism? Feudalism in French? Or Feudalismus in German? Have we, in the same way, taught to the children what secularism is. Laïcité or sécularisme in French, the two words are not the same. I have to explain what the difference? Or Säkularismus or Laizismus or Laizität in German. 3 words explain the differences. And the summum of the summum, have we really taught our kids what truth is? Vérité in French, Wahrheit in German. By teaching the reality of those things, we can use virtual reality to bring them into situations where they would discover with their own eyes what slavery really was. And that subject is very simple, actually. We can just use 2 or 3 scenes of 2 or 3 films on the subject and build them into a virtual reality world, universe. And you can be sure the kids are going to discover the tremendously horror of slavery. Now, do we have the right to do that? The parents are going to protest. Yes, of course the parents are going to protest, because they are responsible for what the world is, even if it is 3 centuries later. And that would enable us to show the limits of truth if we consider truth is only one. At once, limits have to be set, and things are going to be decided not to be true. And yet, what is truth? Scientific truth? Poetical truth? Literary truth? Historical truth? Geographic truth? Demographic truth? The list of truths is tremendous, enormous. And it's obvious that what is true in mathematics is not necessarily true in history, or necessarily true in, let's say, any religion. Because all religions also have a religious truth, each one of them. Only in the field of science, some scientists who are honest with themselves will tell you that even in the hardest science imaginable, what is considered as being the truth today will be considered as being relative tomorrow. But that we forget to make the children experience that relativity. We seem not to have understood that Galileo Galilei was obliged to reject his own theory about the earth being round and turning on itself and around the sun. And his concluding remark to himself or the people who were very close, and yet it turns. We have forgotten that, and that virtual reality would be a tremendous tool to make the children experience the relativity of truth. To go back to the languages and the cultures, the people who are not taught their first language or languages, and their first culture or cultures live a want, they don't get what they should get to develop their languages and their cultures, and a frustration, that is to say, a resentment. And that is the basis of the development of a post-traumatic deculturation stress syndrome. And I insist on syndrome. It's not medical. It is not physiological. It is not genetic. It is exclusively environmental. It is what the kids are imposed onto them or onto that makes them become PT, deculturation, SS. Syndrome, not disorder. When you say that, then you can come to the simple conclusion that a PTSS can be transmitted over generations, and it is long enough when it lasts 20 years to leave traces that will survive the end of it, if there is an end one day. My conclusion there is that in our world we have to target what I call literacy and reject illiteracy. But literacy is not only to write and read one language. As for languages, it is at least to write and read 3 languages. But it is also literacy in many other fields. Literacy in mathematics, literacy in physics, literacy in demography, in history, in philosophy, in all kinds of subjects, including, of course, the scientific subjects. And that is a lot more difficult than just to learn how to read and write one language. And that has to happen at school as soon as the kid is out of the family circle to get some kind of daycare or education. And there is also something that is unluckily wanting or missing from many teachers, and I'm speaking from my experience with my colleagues. What I call technical literacy, that we could call technicracy. This technical literacy is supposed to enable the teachers to use those virtual reality tools, artificial intelligence tools, and all other tools that modern technology provides us with to work with. And there, I must say, even if all those teachers and a lot more other people are not supposed to become computing science or computer science engineers, they definitely have to become computing or computer literate. Otherwise, the kids are going to go to be better than they are. Because the kids are starting as soon as they have a telephone, a smartphone nowadays, learning by themselves what they can do with a bloody machine. And they can do a lot. A lot more than we can. That is the last idea I would like to bring in this discussion. We have to exclude illiteracy from our world. We have to include literacy in our world. We have to refuse selective or reduced literacy. We have to have an inclusive, comprehensive literacy. We have to develop a culture of multiism and pluralism. Without that, we will miss our train to the future. So, have a good trip and a good day. Bye-bye.